May 28, 2014. Something absolutely peculiar went down on their property in Dillsboro, Indiana. Danielle Green called up family and friends saying that their dog, Jazzy, had attacked Ray by his throat. But when the authorities showed up, neither Ray nor the dog was to be found. Even more peculiar, however, was Danielle's response herself. She just went and chatted with people while taking care of her horses like just another day. However, in the course of police investigations into the incident, Danielle began telling different stories about the issue. First, she maintained that the dog attacked Ray, but later changed to the story that he had simply left to work as a trucker. But there was one problem. Ray's truck was still parked at their place, which raised a lot of suspicion. To make things even weirder, there was this big locked toolbox on the property that Danielle wouldn't let anyone open. She insisted it stays shut, which just made the authorities even more suspicious. So they decided to get a search warrant to check it out. And when they pinged Ray's phone, it showed it was still on their property. Everything seemed to point towards something much worse, and the entire situation seemed to imply there was so much more evil to the story. Tracy Abbott, the daughter of Ray's first marriage, clearly recalls that day that her grandmother, Betty, rang her to confirm Danny's claim, saying a dog killed Ray. Tracy couldn't believe it. She kept thinking, how could a dog be responsible for her dad's death? The authorities became suspicious. What exactly happened there? Why was Danielle Green keeping everyone away from the toolbox? Where is the dog and Ray's body? Do you know exactly what cowboy action shooting is? It's a wild, competitive sport that's all about bringing the Old West to life. People get all decked out in gear that's straight out of the 19th century, like spurs, chaps, and hats, while they use guns that look just like the ones you see in the Western movies. The participants shoot at steel targets with lead bullets, but it's all set up like scenes from a gunslinger's life. You need to be quick, precise, and have some serious creativity to stand out, and it attracts some of the best shooters around. One of the coolest things about it is that every competitor picks a cowboy alias, usually inspired by famous Western figures or just fun, quirky names that just fit the cowboy vibe, like High Cotton Kitty, Phony James, Sassy Hammer, Doc R. Green. The idea is to create a character and really get into that Old West spirit. And in this sport in the Indiana region, Ray and Danielle Green were pretty well-known names. Danielle was serious, almost like Annie Oakley, quick and focused. Ray, on the other hand, liked to have fun with all of the cowboy stuff and laughter and not taking life seriously. Together they presented the perfect cowboy and cowgirl couple. To be fair, Ray was a real cowboy. Bull riding, bareback bronco riding, you name it. So he knew animals better than anyone. He'd raised Tracy and her siblings on a massive 200-acre ranch in San Antonio, and animals were a huge part of their world. What really mattered to him was country life, and he loved it more than anything. People around him, such as Dave War, admired Ray not only for his cowboy skills, but also for his character. According to Dave, Ray was the kind of man you could count on. Another close friend, Bob Stevens, had even bigger stories. He recalled how Ray, with his incredible strength, once captured a massive 12-foot alligator all by himself. Such a man would die from the attack of a dog is quite unbelievable. Plus, Ray was not a divorced man. Back in May 2002, Ray's first wife, Maggie, was coming back from a barrel racing event with her horses when a barge crashed into the bridge, sending her vehicle plunging into the water. She died on the spot. Ray was completely shattered. He missed her deeply, often referring to her as his Rose. After the accident, the family got a sizable settlement, over $1 million, which really changed things for Ray. Not long after Maggie's death, a 22-year-old equestrian named Danielle started visiting the ranch. She'd been one of Ray's longtime clients, and before long, she was spending a lot of time there. She remembers how fast things moved between them. Here was Danielle, with all her big dreams of going to the Olympics for dressage. She said all the right things Ray wanted to hear at that time. Things heated up quickly into a vacation together, and before anyone could really process it, into a marriage. Tracy wasn't exactly on board with it. She noticed that Danielle started wearing Maggie's cowboy hats, boots, and jewelry, which reminded everyone of the loss, and it was tough to look at. After Ray and Danielle tied the knot, they packed up and moved to Florida, using the $1 million settlement to buy a place near Palm Beach, which was a hotspot for dressage training. Danielle threw herself into training horses, chasing her Olympic dreams, and spent endless hours perfecting her craft. Ray, more into the ranch life and his equestrian interests, was all in on supporting Danielle's ambitions. Beyond horses, both were huge cowboy action shooting enthusiasts. They traveled all over to compete in the events, fully diving into the cowboy lifestyle, and eventually became well known within the shooting community. Danny quickly became known in the club, and her friends Karen and Jerry O'Clair were very impressed. At that time, Karen was considered the top shooter, but Danny's natural talent easily overthrew her in no time. But things between Ray and Danny started crumbling in 2008 when the economy nosedived. The horse market, their main source of income, collapsed. Their corsage business didn't make it either. Money got tight fast, and they had to take out a second mortgage just to cover the first one. They were flailing, but trying to hang in there and hold on to the life they had established, still shooting in cowboy action, shooting matches and selling eggs from their chickens to neighbors just to keep food on the table. Meanwhile, Danny and Ray began to turn things around a little bit when their neighborhood hired them for some landscaping work. They received a contract to care for the right-of-ways, mow lawns, and deal with ditches. Bob, their neighbor, thought Danny did not have any use for fancy things or trying to look important. But to Tracy, Ray's daughter, used to think that Danny wanted only to marry her dad for his money, unaware that Ray had lost most of his money after moving to Florida. Tracy's suspicions only grew when she realized she couldn't get a hold of her dad anymore. She found out that Danny had blocked her number from their shared phone, and before long, her emails and even a certified letter she sent with family photos came back undelivered. Tracy began to feel a bit shut out from her father's life and became increasingly bitter towards the fact that Danny was only keeping him away on purpose. Tracy believed that Danny's reason for doing this was to control what little amount of money he had left. For someone like Tracy, she had lost her mom, and now she was being cast away from her dad. This broke her. On the other hand, it wasn't an easy ride for Danny. She did some pretty good work in the local horse shows, but making it to the Olympics was always a bit of a distant dream. Everything changed in 2012 when both of her parents were diagnosed with terminal cancer. She knew she had to do something, so she decided to leave Florida and move back to Indiana to care for them. Danny and her boyfriend Ray had to sell their property in Florida, but they took a huge financial hit. Ray's landscaping job was their only income, so he stayed behind in Florida, living with a friend. This time, things weren't exactly smooth between her and Ray. Danny would belittle him in front of friends. Since Ray was financially dependent on her, he wasn't exactly eating well. He survived off of bread and water or maybe just cold cereal. But even in all the tension, there was a little bit of light. Ray reconnected with his daughter Tracy when he got a cell phone after Danny was gone. They started talking almost every day, which really meant a lot to both of them. Unfortunately, in 2013, Danny's parents died, and things became even worse for Ray, who lost his landscaping contract. But there was still a silver lining. This time, it was Danny who inherited 100 acres of her family's land, which included an old farmhouse in need of some serious work. Ray joined her in Indiana, and they moved into a trailer on the property. Danny took charge, planning to turn the land into a horse farm, while Ray decided to get his trucker's license to bring in some steady income. But with all the changes, their relationship wasn't easy. So Ray had to divorce Danny because of money issues. It wasn't that Ray wanted to end things with Danny, but something he had to do to make ends meet. By the end of 2013, they were technically separated, but they still lived together. Then in the spring of 2014, Ray and Danny decided to start fresh in Indiana. And here, things took a horrifying turn, changing their lives in ways they could never have imagined. On May 28th that year, Danny sent out a chilling message to family and friends, telling them that their German Shepherd dog killed Ray. Nobody knew what really went on, and Danny's account of the situation didn't even make sense. Ray's mother, Betty, called the sheriff's office in Dillsboro, Indiana, to report what she had heard coming from Danny. Her call reflected just how confused and shocked everyone was by the death of Ray. When the police came by their backcountry place to check in on Ray, they were unable to locate him or his dog, Jazzy. That's when red flags rose and the local police became suspicious that something was fishy. What started off as a simple wellness check went full-blown into an investigation. Danny was cooperating with the police, but there was one thing she kept insisting on. They weren't allowed to open this big metal toolbox sitting a few yards away from their trailer. She told them it belonged to Ray and that it was padlocked, though one side wasn't fully closed. But what really got the cops spooked was the odor coming from the box and the flies buzzing around it. Naturally, it was extremely suspicious. The detectives got a search warrant, and as you guessed, upon opening the box, they found Ray Green's body inside. That was a horrifying discovery. The detectives returned to Danny to let her know they had wrapped up the search. Her response? Totally cold. She just said, "Okay." But her attitude changed after that. Suddenly, she reversed her account and said that she had also shot Ray 2 days back. It was all in the name of self-defense, and that he used to mistreat her for a long time through physical and sexual abuse. She even mentioned how Ray had attempted to force himself on her several times, such as walking naked around the house and trying to drag her towards him. Whenever she refused to do anything, she said he would choke her out until she could not breathe anymore. Danny explained further that on the evening of the shooting, she had been lying on the couch half asleep when Ray entered, held her down, and pressed his forearm against her throat. She couldn't breathe and related how he told her, "I just wanted to hug you," while doing all this. Then things escalated on Memorial Day, May 26th. Danny had just used the bathroom and was quietly walking back to the couch when Ray suddenly jumped up, threatened to kill her, and reached for his loaded .38 handgun that was sitting on the nightstand. In the ensuing struggle, Danny said she pushed him onto the bed and shot him 5 times in the chest. She did not remember pulling the trigger or aiming the gun, but just heard the shots. Danny had been shot, but Ray just wouldn't stop threatening her. He kept whispering, "I'm going to kill you." Terrified for her life, she ran to the back of the trailer, grabbed more ammo, and came back to find Ray still sitting at the foot of the bed. As he started leaning toward her again, she didn't hesitate. She fired 5 more shots, this time hitting him in the head. Later, Danny demonstrated to the detectives step-by-step what happened. Lawyer Delmar Weldon explained that the whole thing isn't rando. It is built because of years of abuse and is the result of such conditions. According to Weldon, when Ray continued forcing his way with her, then a scenario like this was in inevitability. Just a woman defending herself to the extreme, said Lawyer Weldon. Danny's involvement in her husband Ray's death started on May 26, 2014, when his body was found in a toolbox on a remote mountaintop in Indiana. It did not take long for the medical examiner to rule it a homicide, and 8 days later Danny was arrested and charged with his murder. Danny was an excellent cowboy action shooter. She was taught how to fire 5 rounds and reload before firing 5 more. That's what she did that day. According to the autopsy, 10 low-velocity bullets tore through Ray's body, which used the type of bullets typical for cowboy action shooting contests. Ray's death shook everyone, particularly people like Dave Warr, his friend and fellow shooter, who could not understand how a person like Danny, whom he thought was a good person, could be involved. However, Delmar Weldon stood by his claim that Danny had acted in self-defense. According to him, Danny had been attacked and feared for her life. He cites on the surface that she reloaded her gun during the incident, just like she said. Danny kept her story consistent by working with investigators throughout and believed that Weldon was solid proof she wasn't guilty. Even though Danny stuck to her story, investigators decided to dig a little deeper into her personal life. Then they began to examine her relationship with another man, named George Mann, a man she knew from the cowboy action shooting world. George, who had the nickname Angus McNasty, had known the Greens for years, but things became more complicated when Danny moved to Indiana in 2012 to care for her sick parents. Remember, that time Ray couldn't come with her? That's when she and George started secretly chatting online, and these messages became pretty frequent, sometimes even several times a day. At first, George downplayed their connection, saying it was nothing serious, but the messages they were sending told a different story. Like Danny once texted him, "Curled up by a fire under a blanket with nothing on underneath, sipping hot chocolate. Can you top that?" And George replied, "Nothing can top that. Wish I were there." George denied being in love with Danny, calling her just a nice person, but investigators found out that he actually admitted to having feelings for her, even saying he loved her. They started thinking that Danny might have dreamt of leaving Ray and a new life with George, maybe in Florida, where she had a grand plan of raising horses. The whole thing of George, which Danny had been keeping from Ray, suddenly became the core of the investigation. They started thinking that this secret affair might have led Danny to extreme measures. Maybe she felt that there was no other way of ending Ray's life and finding love with George and a chance to start anew. When the investigation continued, with Danny's version of shooting out of self-defense and what they discovered about her secret romance with George, things got harder for them. Her defense lawyer portrayed her as a lady who was merely trying to be on the safe side for herself, but the detectives were not so sure of that. But then, the investigators found something shocking. They found some shady Google searches on Danny's computer, including one asking, "What happens when you shoot a guy in the head with a .38? That was a red flag since Ray was killed with a .38 caliber gun. Danny's defense had this witness, Carol, a mail carrier, who said she'd seen signs of abuse. She claimed that Danny frequently had black eyes and that she believed that Ray was the one assaulting her, although Danny repeatedly testified that the injuries were obtained from falling or getting kicked by a horse. George Mann also testified that Danny once testified before him that Ray had thrown her across a wall during a tussle. But then there were friends of the couple who claimed to have never seen anything of the sort. So now everyone was left wondering, was Danny just a victim of abuse trying to defend herself, or was this murder all planned out because of some secret romance and the desire to start a new life? Fast forward to August 2015, and Danny's murder trial kicks off. The prosecutors showed some key evidence, including the revolver used in the killing. The gun was a .38 and had shot through a blanket before hitting Ray. The prosecutors pointed out that Ray probably slept when he got shot, making Danny's self-defense story a little fishy. In fact, there were holes in Danny Green's story. She said where Ray's body was found on the floor, but conveniently omitted to say she cut a piece of carpet from the trailer floor, which later was found in a toolbox right where Ray's body was found. Prosecutors seized upon that, asking how she could possibly argue it was a matter of self-defense when she seemed to be trying to clean up the evidence. Naturally, after 2 weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for 8 hours and came back with a guilty verdict for murder. Danny was found guilty of murder and received a 60-year prison sentence for killing Ray. She again insisted that she had shot him in self-defense, although she had shot him 10 times. One of Ray's relatives even came out and said that while Danny was locked up, the justice that Ray needed had been served because he died as a good, godly man. And amidst all these, here's the weird part. Their dog, Jazzy, was never found. And another surprising part, Ray and his first wife, Maggie, both died on the same day, May 26th, just 12 years apart. Some people, like their friend Bob Stevens, thought it was more than just a coincidence. He believed it was a sign that Ray and Maggie were somehow reunited after death. As for Danny, she attempted to get a retrial, but that did not occur. She is still in prison, and she is not eligible for parole until she is 71. So, what do you think now? Was it a cold-blooded killing? Or just a woman killed a man in self-defense? Drop your views in the comments section. And watch this video to see how some consistent anonymous letters messed up a whole countryside in the US for 20 years, leading to violence and death too. If you liked this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel. See you soon.